Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Coachella Valley Direct Primary Care. I am Dr. Michael Kim, and my wife, Dr. Krista Burris, is running a little bit late. She is taking care of patients right now, and today is October 25th, 2021, and we have been producing this show for COVID-19 and specifically for the Coachella Valley. Um, and we've been talking about what's been going on and the numbers. Generally, my wife is the numbers person in our team. So we'll wait a little bit and see if she can break away in the next few minutes. But today we also wanted to let everyone know that, since the numbers have been looking really good, I believe the numbers are good today. I haven't seen them again. Dr. Burris is the person that monitors them. We've been talking between each other, and this is going to be our last COVID show itself, unless there is something compelling or changes, because things are just moving in the right direction. And today we'll talk about a lot of the things that have occurred, that are probably coming down the pipeline, and the things that will impact people's day-to-day lives, especially here in the Coachella Valley. But really, there shouldn't be anything that is earth-shattering, unless my wife brings numbers that are different. So we will wait in anticipation and see if that is the case. Certainly, we always encourage everyone to talk to their provider about everyone's unique situation, because even with a first-time vaccine or a booster, whether it's the Pfizer for the kids that are coming out and Moderna, or the boosters, everyone's situation is going to be a little unique and different. And so having a dialogue with your provider is important to make sure that you are doing what's right for you. These recommendations that come out are for public health and population as a whole, but not everyone fits in the same mold. So definitely talk to your provider to make sure that you are getting the right information for you. And I did want to mention that we do a show afterwards, um, and it's about personal health, and we talk about other things other than COVID. So, we do appreciate everyone who has commented on our show. We do appreciate everyone who's followed us. I've learned a lot about COVID by having to stay up to date on shows like this. We try to give everyone the best data and synthesize it. Well, and we try to, put our spin on it and make sure everyone is, understands that. And here's Dr. Burris. So we will welcome her to the show. I will move over. Hello, Dr. Burris.
Hi.
You need to get a chair.
I need to get a chair. Okay.
So we informed everyone, and we'll talk a little bit more about that this would be our last show. Well, did you want to say anything about that before you get into the numbers? You want to jump into the numbers, or what do you want to do?
No, I think I'll talk about it at the end.
Okay, so let's jump into the numbers.
So, the numbers here today, yes, I need them larger. These are for the county, and again, this is a daily epidemiology from October 22nd. So it's from last Friday. And what you'll see here is we are continuing our downward trend as far as new cases, and we still have about 250 just under in the hospital in the county. We'll still continue to see hospitalized people probably for another month or two, as people who are currently being infected go on to develop more severe disease. Thankfully, I think we're nearly out of this second little surge. I don't expect to see a winter surge. We might see a little bump, an increase in cases, but unless something drastically changes, like a new strain that evades vaccine protection, I'm hopeful that this winter we'll be dealing with COVID more as a occasional thing in the medical community rather than as an overwhelming number of our cases. So
I would say probably that's true for our valley, but I think there are going to be some cities
yes, this is very specific to the Coachella Valley and other areas of the country. I still think they're dealing with Delta. They're still on the downslope, but they're not out of it yet, and they still have large portions of their population unvaccinated, and they probably will see higher rates throughout the winter.
Right.
But for us, I think we're skating pretty good right now.
Right, but you should probably, if you're going to go to a different city, make sure that they're not in a surge themselves.
Yeah, I do say if you're traveling over the holidays into an area of the country that's different from here, I would check out their rates, and if they've got a high rate of transmission, you may want to take that into account and take extra precautions while you're traveling there. Let's go down to the bottom. So you see, we talked last time about how we have this really slow curve down, and it just is continuing to like inch down as far as our positivity rate. And we're now in the valley, closer to 4, but it's just going just phenomenally slow. It's like watching Jello melt or something. It's taking a while. Let's go to the next slide. This is our weekly report for the Coachella Valley. And then this is the week that ends on October 17th. So again, this is slightly behind, and that is normal. This is still what I would consider very fast data reporting in the world of public health, because it just takes time for that reporting to happen, the collection, and crunching all the numbers, inputting all the data. And what we see is just we're, again, following the trends in the rest of the county, but maybe even, I think we might be at our steady state for the winter. I'm not sure we're going to see it come down all the way down to where it was back before Delta hit. We may just have this low level of transmission ongoing for the next few months, because we still do have a fair number of people coming into the valley from other places, bringing it with them, as well as a vulnerable population and a portion of our community that's still unprotected. So that actually takes us into the next part of what I wanted to talk about, which is what's happened with the FDA this week on vaccine boosters.
Okay.
Did you want to talk about something else?
Well, I think we'll reflect a little bit on our show.
Mm-hmm.
We did want to let everyone know that just because the show is not going to go on, that we are here. If you have questions about COVID or anything, that's what we do. Just like the show, we are responsive, and that's what makes direct primary care different than others. But other than that, no, I think your discussion will lead us into a couple of tangents. But
well, in this week, actually tomorrow, the CDC committee is meeting to, or no, it's the FDA is meeting to vote on Pfizer vaccine in 5 to 11-year-olds. So that's tomorrow. If they say yes, then that goes to the CDC, and that is probably going to happen within a week. So it looks like the first vaccine most likely will be approved by the first week of November for that group, and that would be Pfizer. Moderna put their data out today regarding their vaccine in this age group, and it looks like they'll be submitting their request for an EUA in the near future, if not today, at which point we will go through this process with that vaccine and end up probably hearing about that before the end of the year. So they're a month or two behind Pfizer. The other thing that did get approved by the CDC, so people should know this, is Moderna and Johnson & Johnson have now been approved for boosters. Johnson & Johnson is for anybody who got one shot of Johnson & Johnson, and they are eligible for a booster 2 months after their first shot, and that's anybody. Moderna is only for people 65 or older or who have a pre-existing condition that increases their risk of severe disease. And this includes just being overweight, not even obese, just a little overweight, and that qualifies you for a booster. And the Moderna booster is a smaller dose, so people should know about that. And then the other big news is that you can now mix and match. And if you are due for a booster, you can get any of the shots. Now, it'll be interesting to see how that rolls out and whether they just, allow people to choose when they get there, or whether you'll have to actually make an appointment for a specific one. But the reality is, if you were waiting for that, if you were interested in getting a different shot than you got initially, now that approval has been given to do that, that is possible. Yeah.
So then you don't have to answer, but what would you, if you didn't get your booster, what would you get?
Oh, for me, given my age range, if I had not already gotten my booster of Pfizer, I would probably have boosted it with Moderna. And if I were you, having gotten Moderna initially, I probably would just get a Moderna booster. If I had gotten Johnson & Johnson, I probably would get a booster dose with one of the other vaccines, Pfizer or Moderna. I don't think if I had gotten Pfizer, Moderna, I would go to J&J. But I think definitely if you had a good experience with your first series and you want to just stick with it, that's totally reasonable. There's no clear, huge benefit to switching it out, with the possible exception of if you had a J&J vaccine the first time. It may give you some additional benefit to go with the Pfizer or Moderna.
No, I agree with you. I think the first thing is what happened to you after your first go around. And switching between the two, you could have like the two types, not the two. Right? So if you got J&J and you went to the mRNA, you don't know really what that would do because it's a different vaccine, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I do agree with you. I think, the mRNA seems to be better. So I would lean more toward that. And I probably would do the Moderna only also because it's a lower dosage rather than the Pfizer full dose.
I will say, Pfizer, Moderna have to be 6 months after that first 2 doses. So now, if you only got one shot originally, you can just get your second shot now as a booster. You don't have to then go back and get another shot. I would tell people, if they were in that boat and they kind of didn't get around to that second shot, just go get your second shot now, and it can be any of them.
Right. And not everyone needs a booster.
Right. So if you're under 65, I would say probably under 50, and you have no health problems at all, and you're not overweight, and you don't work in a high risk community or in a high risk, like public facing job, and you don't care for anybody who's vulnerable, your need for a booster is questionable, honestly. So I think that it's reasonable if you're in that category to hold off, um, especially if you're worried about side effects. Having said that, I had like almost no side effects from my booster and minor arm soreness, but it was the kind that only bothered me when someone came up and punched me in the arm. But it didn't stop me from doing anything, and I didn't take any medicine for it. And I didn't even think about it until my son came up and punched me in the arm to be funny. And I'm like, ow, you know.
But we know other people that have had swollen lymph nodes,
Mm-hmm.
they got sick, they got a fever, they had
Yeah,
diarrhea, so it runs the whole.
it's variable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess the question I would have for you next is, if you had natural infection,
Mm.
should you get the booster or should you get vaccinated still?
So this scenario comes up a lot, either for people who've never been vaccinated and they got COVID, and now they're saying, well, should I get a booster dose or should I get my original series? And the official recommendation is to go ahead and get a full series. And with Johnson and Johnson, I would say that's 2 shots 2 months apart. I wouldn't call that second shot a booster. I really do think it's more of a completed series. That's why they recommend it now for everyone. So it's technically just part of the original series. So 2 shots of Moderna, Pfizer, and J&J if you've never had a vaccine. And timing that, I would do it sometime in that 3 to 6 months after infection. Because at that point, your natural immunity is starting to wane and you could use some more protection. What's less clear to me, and we don't have firm guidelines on this, is what to do with a person who was fully vaccinated who then had COVID afterwards. And I would still probably say a booster is reasonable. But the timing of that is a little bit of best guess right now. So again, I'd probably put that booster 3 to 6 months after that infection.
Yeah.
Your
And
thoughts?
no, I agree with everything you said. I think you know the we do know that the antibody starts waning whatever you do, whether you have natural infection or vaccine, and that we do know that the um, vaccines have been very good at preventing hospitalization and severe problems. And so trying to keep the population's level of antibodies at a higher rate, because we still are seeing people, like you said, it's not going to go to 0 or 1% in the near future, the positivity. So there are still going to be people it's going to run into who are going to have problems, and it's not going to overwhelm our system. It's not going to have to shut the economy down, but people are going to have problems with it. So, I think as a whole, to protect people who can't get it, because there are tons of people still out there who can't get the vaccine because we don't know what it'll do. I have a friend who has 2 young children with SMA, spinal muscular atrophy, and we don't know what this mRNA vaccine will do to these kinds of diseases. So our best way to protect these people are to protect them by everyone else around them, driving that positivity rate down. So
I'm thinking, how do we move forward into the next few years? And this is my thoughts on how that's going to happen. I think what we'll see is a shift in focus to now vaccinating the rest of the world, because I think we're finally ready to address that on a bigger scale. It's not that we haven't started, but that needs to be done in order to actually end the pandemic.
right.
So once we've done that, and I really do think theoretically we could do it faster, but I think it's going to take 2 to 3 years. Then I think COVID's going to go to a vaccine that we get if there are outbreaks. So either it'll turn into a pattern more like the flu that pops up during the winter and we'll get a booster like a flu shot, or we'll end up just vaccinating for it when it flares up again. So we'll see.
Right.
Yeah.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about, what are your thoughts on antibody testing? And so I was reading today that they actually can test for the nuclear capsid, which is for natural immunity,
Mm-hmm.
and then the spike protein, which would be for the
Vaccine.
But people are starting to try to use that to decide whether they should or shouldn't get vaccinated. Or
I don't think that there's any data that helps us if by looking at that. So whether or not you still have antibodies from a natural infection or from a vaccine, you still can get infected. Um, and it's not helpful probably for most people in their decision making process, honestly. Um, I don't use that as a doctor. If someone's unsure whether they had a natural infection recently and they're wanting to get vaccinated, but they want to make sure they wait, maybe I'd use it in that scenario. But overall, I find that most of the people who want tests like that are trying to get it so that they don't have to get vaccinated. They just don't want the vaccine. And this is something that they think will justify that. And in that point, I'm like, I don't think that's as helpful.
well, there's those people that got it and then had or continue to have reactions, so they want to know if their antibody levels are sufficient enough because they don't want to get another.
Oh, that's the other thing. Your antibody levels do not accurately predict your ability to protect yourself from a disease on an individual level. And this is a really hard concept. So just because you as an individual have, say, lower levels of antibody at that time does not necessarily correlate into whether or not you as an individual are adequately protected. Even though we talk about waning immunity and titers going down, we're really talking about that on a population level. And that's a different discussion than is this individual protected or not.
But and with COVID, I mean, there's no standard right now,
Mm-mm.
so every lab is going to have a different cutoff. Well, they're not
Yeah.
even giving you a level; they're just giving
Right.
you a number, saying, "Here's your number. Have a nice day."
Right. We know from other diseases, if your antibody levels are completely undetectable, you probably need a booster. You're probably not protected. But if you've got lowish levels of antibody, that doesn't necessarily transmit into you not being able to fight off that infection or not still being protected from severe disease. And that's some of the complications that went into the discussion about whether boosters are necessary and why there's still, definitely
Right.
some disagreement, especially in young, healthy people.
So,
Okay.
You want to talk about
The end of the COVID show?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really, really happy to be ending this show. I think that COVID's still going to be with us for a long time, but I think the need for weekly monitoring of our local situation right now is probably over. Like we're at the point now where not much is being changed over the last couple months, honestly. We're just coming down out of Delta and the vaccine rates and the community herd immunity is, creeping up. So I think right now we've reached a point where we're kind of in um, not a steady state, but sort of a holding pattern with COVID. I think this has been a very interesting experience as a doctor to do this show, especially just in the midst of all all the opinions and all the feelings and all the drama that have come with this pandemic. Um, but it has some days been really hard to kind of mentally pull myself together to do it, honestly. But I think it's also been something for those of you who've tuned in and listened. I really wanted to provide something that is giving you information that is as non-biased and as just matter of fact as we could, to just sort of help you make decisions and help provide for people out there, um, just sort of a place you could come and ask a question, or um, just the current state of what do we know.
What would you like to say to people in terms of moving forward and um, any advice or?
Oh, yeah. I think that we've talked a lot on the show about the bigger impacts of COVID. Like, we've got the physical impacts, the financial impacts, and the emotional and relational impacts. Um, I would encourage people that it's not like a switch is flipped and everything goes back to normal and we just move on and everything's fine. I suspect, much like our grandparents were marked by the Great Depression, and it was a character feature of their generation, almost their response to that, and everyone had something about their personality that was kind of shifted by that experience. Um, I think that the people alive today probably will carry this with them, and it will sort of change the way they view the world, change the way they view their families or the people close to them. And I think that going forward, I hope people intentionally take some reflective time over the next, 5 years, honestly, to kind of think about how this has, maybe impacted them in a way that they're going to turn it into something positive for them in their life. Whether it's just a new appreciation for being alive, or a new appreciation for how fragile all these things that we think are stable are, and just to value things that are important. What about you?
No, I agree. I think COVID um, did a lot of destruction in all the different ways you talked about, socially, economically, politically. Um, and, I hope people in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years take the time to start rebuilding relationships, rebuilding their jobs in a better way and not just the same way it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think for what I've learned is that, the things that we thought we were doing well, we weren't. For instance, mental health was always covered with a thin veil of everyone's doing well. And, when we couldn't do things, it shifted, toward, well, we need to get kids back in school. Well, yes, we do, but that shouldn't be the mental health solution of kids. It shouldn't be, that's not where it should rest. It should rest in the hands of the mental health profession and the community, and schooling is one part of it, but it can't be the end all and be all.
Right. It's not, there's, I think, no one solution to many of these larger problems, and
Right.
the necessity of us to work cooperatively as as a community was really, really unveiled, like
Right.
you said. And in the places where we failed to do that, we suffered.
Right.
And so I think that maybe is my takeaway right now of moving forward. How do I intentionally rebuild some of that cooperative relationship within the community, at least in my corner of it? Um, how do we move forward? And like you said, um, not just put the same thing back together, but maybe take something we've learned and make it better.
Right. And I hope that we can all detangle the politicalness of what has happened with COVID, and so that we can rebuild, relationships and other things free from that because it's not a political thing, but it turned into one. And I think if we can't find a way to move forward, doesn't mean I have to agree with everything that someone else agrees with, but we need to, as adults and as a country, move forward in the sense that it's not, that's not the goal. Right? Our goal is to keep moving forward together in unity. Unity doesn't mean we all think the same way, right? So we can be different but still have common goals, and I hope that we can do that as a community, as a family, as a country. So, the other thing I'd like to say to people is, I'm a firm believer of, the numbers are going down, the boosters are coming out, kids are getting a boost, but we stay in the same lane, right? Social distancing, masking. I like the Swiss cheese model when they came out, right? The more we can put the layers in, the more we can stay safe until we get the numbers driven down, which we think in 2-3 years is probably, like you said, it'll be a nuisance. But it's not going to surge like it used to. But your people are still going to be. We still had a positive last week, so that whoever that family was is dealing with that positive case. So, if everyone just kind of stays in the same lanes of, do as much as you can with the Swiss cheese model. And if you don't know what that is, you can always Google it. You can search our past shows. But, those are just ways where you can stay sane. So you're not going, hey, the vaccine and this and that, or I don't need this anymore. And then, you have to deal with the periphery of another positive case. So,
yeah. So yeah, it's going to be a few years before we're not thinking about it. Yeah, but we will get there. Where you may think about COVID like you think about the flu or a cold or chickenpox or the measles, which means occasionally and with appropriate concern, but not on a daily basis. Right. Yeah.
And I would say, you talk to your primary care provider. The data that comes out, even whatever you listen to, it's always spun. Mm-hmm. And, talking to it with someone who you trust, who knows, what the data, how to crunch the data, we're not all public health experts, but, we've had more experience with things like that. And every person is different in their medical problems. And so, talk to your primary care provider. And this is, I think, a good thing for people to start doing again. And if you don't have one or you can't get in to see your primary care provider, you can always give us a call. We don't charge just to talk. We have changed our models so that we can be available and do things like this. This is not unusual how we actually have visits with our patients and talk to them, have hour-long visits. So if that's something you want, we'd happy to talk to you about that. But, I do want to thank everyone for the opportunity. I learned a lot. About COVID, about, how I reacted to COVID, and, I enjoyed the show. Like you said, mostly there are some days where, everyone's lives are crazy and busy, I do appreciate. Thank you, everybody. And so if you have time, we have run into our next show, but we will talk about sleep. And we are transitioning the COVID show to something different, so stay tuned. So we will be talking about other things, but we will keep that a surprise for now. So any last minute things you want to say? Or
no?
All right. Well, we thank everyone for joining and for tuning in. Again, if you have any questions, please call us. Please put comments in, and we will respond. And we will only come back if something drastic changes, but we don't think it is going to happen. We think that COVID is it's on the downturn, and so we think that we won't need to do another show on COVID. So. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Join us on our next show if you can. It's coming on right now.
Okay.